Hello and welcome to 7 Jars of Hot Pickled Peppers, all about healing after a stroke. I'm Christine, a stroke survivor. I had a pontine hemorrhagic stroke, and I understand how recovery can be a real roller coaster ride. My hope is to help other stroke survivors transform the ups, the downs, and the scary drops into something more manageable, more like the carousel. And you even get to pick your own horse.
Welcome to the podcast of 7 Jars of Hot Pickled Peppers. Season 1, Episode 8, Stroke Strikes. The information and conversations in these podcasts are general in nature and do not replace the care and instruction that you receive from your doctor or therapist. Please discuss your own personal needs and circumstances with your healthcare provider. You can join the conversation through email at 7jarsofhotpickledpeppers@gmail.com, or you can tweet us at number 7, capital J, small ARS, or on Facebook at 7 Jars of Hot Pickled Peppers. This week's quote of the cast. Wear your tragedies as armor, not shackles. Anonymous.
When you think of a typical stroke patient, the mind readily drifts towards someone who is elderly, possibly overweight, doesn't exercise much, and maybe even smokes. Approximately every 9 minutes, someone in Canada has a stroke. In further research, stroke among younger people is on the rise. Stroke can strike anyone. It is no longer just an old person concern. But maybe it never was. During my exploration of strokes, the focus seemed to be that all strokes are caused by unhealthy life choices and things like high blood pressure, cholesterol, poor diet, lack of exercise, too much alcohol, even stress. While true, the majority of strokes are linked to poor health, it is not the only cause. I lived a fairly healthy lifestyle, with maybe stress and work being more than it should have. The abnormal blood vessel that bled, causing my stroke, could have been in my brain my whole life, though. I think I'm pretty healthy, other than my stroke. I agree we need to focus on the majority, as that is where the most good can be done. But there still needs to be acknowledgement that not all strokes are caused by poor lifestyle, and it can strike anyone, anytime. One article I read initially gave me hope, stating long work hours could lead to stroke. I was a workaholic. My hope was dashed when it went on to say long work hours often increased unhealthy lifestyles, with most people having sedentary jobs. If anything, my long work hours increased my daily exercise, having a physical job. I am not minimizing a healthy lifestyle at all. Just education is power, and I know I thought I couldn't be having a stroke because I felt I was too healthy, delaying me in seeking medical help. Ultimately, it all comes down to playing the odds. A healthy lifestyle dramatically reduces the odds of having a stroke, yet some of the healthiest people may still have one. Don't delay getting help, no matter your age, or if you think you're too healthy, or you think it couldn't happen to you. It could.
I'd like to introduce this week's guest. Joining us today is Dan Yaretz, a teacher, a musician, an outdoor enthusiast, and a stroke survivor. He was a teenager when he experienced his stroke. He's here today to tell us about his journey.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us today, Dan.
Hey, it's great to be here.
So Ken did a little bit of an introduction for you, but would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself? Who is Dan?
Definitely. Well, Dan is a musician and also a teacher, a music educator, and as well as an outdoor enthusiast. So with those three things, I love like when things come in groups of three, as we all know. For me, a musician, that's something I've always done since I was a little tyke. When I was 6 years old, I just loved music, like especially pianos when I got started. And so that's kind of my main instrument, and I got a degree in music. So that's led me to the next chapter, which was teaching.
Okay.
And so I'm also a music educator, and I'm actually a middle school teacher right now in my hometown.
Great.
And so I just kind of put those two passions together. And then also Dan is a outdoor junkie. I love being outdoors. So I love being an enthusiast of the outdoor sports. So I do a lot of things from hiking, mountaineering, scuba diving, kayaking. I do a ton of outdoor sports, and I just love being outside. So
That's fantastic. I know just before we started, you shared your pictures from scuba diving in the Bahamas. Very, very jealous with the waters and the scenes, and inspiring me to maybe try scuba diving in the future.
I think you'd be amazing at it. It would be a fun hobby for sure.
Okay, wow. Future date, maybe.
There we go.
So, going back in time, with all these things you've done, you're also a stroke survivor. Would you mind telling us a little bit about what caused you to have a stroke?
Yeah, definitely. So back in 2010, so I was still in high school at this time, and I caught a very rare infection on my heart, actually.
Oh, my goodness.
So I was going through a tough time. They're trying to figure out what was wrong with me, and after a bunch of tests, they concluded that I had something called endocarditis.
Oh, my goodness.
So,
I've never heard of that.
Endocarditis is kind of like an infection on the heart. It causes like it kind of grows on your heart, and it grows like little polyps and things and stuff, and it usually attacks near around your valves of your heart.
Oh my goodness.
So it's a very damaging infection. It's very bad, and for me, I was starting to get heart regurgitation and heart failure because of blood was getting pumped back into my lungs and stuff. So like it was it wasn't doing amazing things for me.
No doubt.
So because of all that, I had to undergo some open heart surgeries, two in fact, open heart surgeries to help me recover from this and like get rid of this infection. And because of this, during my surgeries, I actually suffered a stroke.
Oh my goodness.
What happened was, and from what my doctors tell me, pieces of this infection, broke away.
Right.
And then went up into my brain, which then caused a minor stroke to happen.
Oh,
so
my
that's the story of how and where that all comes from is from this infection that I had from my heart. So not a stroke that was caused by because there's many types of strokes. I think that's the thing that people always get confused about. And so for me, mine was something. My stroke came from something else, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was atypical. The majority is caused by some type of a blockage, often due to heart disease, but yours was still a blockage, but a very different type of blockage. And that's what we're trying to get out there today, is there's many different reasons for stroke. So not only were you dealing with the heart infection, then you also had to deal with the stroke. So how did the doctors determine you had had a stroke?
They determined it through MRI.
Oh, okay.
So they still found some of the in my brain, some areas where they thought there was blockages, but they weren't blockages. They were, because a blockage means it was blocked. But they found pieces of what they think was of the infection and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they kind of concluded that that's where where they found that out. So yeah, MRI is where they found that for me.
Great. And so what kind of treatment with still having these bits that had traveled from your heart to your brain? Was it just time for it to reabsorb, or?
Yeah, so I think it over time they just went away, because I only had one stroke, and so
one's enough.
One's enough, right? So whatever was left there, I think it was absorbed or it moved on and got yeah.
Okay. So you were dealing with two very different things. Were you dealing with recovery simultaneously for both your heart and your stroke?
So I was mainly recovering from heart, and the stroke was an afterthought.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because I didn't notice the effects of my stroke until I was actually coming back into society.
Okay.
Coming home and doing actually some brain work, and because heart surgery on its own took a toll on me,
I guess.
and I
Yes.
was on a ton of antibiotics and drugs, so I had no idea where my brain was at anyways. So
For
I had no
sure.
baseline to see where the effects of the stroke, where
Right.
it damaged and stuff.
Okay.
So for me, my recovery was mostly based on getting better from heart surgery.
That's
Yeah.
right. So how
So
long did that take?
for me, my recovery, so initial recovery, so I was in the hospital for 2.5 months. So then it it took years, but I was starting to feel better within 2 months after that initial 2 months. So what is that? 2 months after the
Yeah.
incident, let's say that. Yeah,
Okay.
something like that. Yeah, that I was starting to have energy to run around and kind of be sort
Right.
of normal for a bit. So
Well, especially as a
yeah.
high school student, I mean, that's quite a prime time in someone's life.
It was, yeah, it was really tricky. I was able to go back to finish my grade 12 year the next year. I didn't get pulled back in any way. Still
Oh,
able to finish that
nice.
year off and stuff, so that was fantastic. But it wasn't until the following year of school is when I started to notice changes with my brain and stuff. So,
Because your stroke. So what changes did you notice?
so for me, my stroke was mainly with recall and some and memory stuff. A little bit of speech, I think, as well.
Okay.
We never did a full test to really conclude what it affected, because it was
Really?
so minor that
Okay.
our focus was mostly on physiotherapy and recovery of the other thing,
Right.
that the stroke was kind of a minor afterthought again.
Yeah.
So I had to I got some diagnosis, and then I had to self-diagnose the rest, which
Really?
was kind of tricky,
Well,
right?
no doubt you don't know
Yeah.
what's a new normal is hard to define with help, and so defining it on your own. But yeah, I guess your heart superseded that.
Superseded all that stuff.
Wow.
But mainly for me, it was recall. So, uh, math. I used to be really, really good at math. So A+
Mm-hmm.
student in math, and I went down to like a C/D in my last year, and
Oh,
that was just within like 4 months of surgery, right? And
really?
so I started to notice that how I viewed numbers and words and recalling in the short term was
Okay.
difficult. It was different. I
Mm,
wouldn't consider it difficult, because for me it was frustrating.
I
It was
guess.
not, yeah, it was difficult because it was frustrating, because my brain was working differently than it was before.
And you could, I maybe putting words in your mouth, but
Yeah.
what I've discovered, I could remember what I used to do, but I
Yeah.
couldn't put that into practice.
Exactly. I think that's the hardest thing. It's almost like the limb thing, when you lose a limb and you get that
Oh,
effect that it's still there, but and you know
yeah.
how to use it, but it doesn't work, sort of thing.
So you were finding that with math and with words.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I used to really speak in very, like, not exuberant language, but I had a very good way with sentences and
Right.
word structure. And I just couldn't remember some words that I wanted to use, and it didn't come up very well, certain memories and stuff for short
Mm.
term. And I think this funny thing is that people didn't notice or care, because they
Uh,
thought I was normal. They said, "Oh, you're just normal now."
so you had lost some of that vibrancy you
Yeah,
remembered having, but
yeah,
other people didn't recognize it.
yeah.
So that adds another layer of frustration.
That was very frustrating. I think that was very frustrating for sure.
'Cause you know that wasn't how you used to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So that's hard. So today, this is a number of years later. I mean, you've gone on working harder to get your teaching and your music degrees and do all these things. But are there still any effects you manage in your life from that?
Yeah, so I was able to work through all those. I never wanted to go get it diagnosed because I didn't want to get help or be labeled, I think was the thing. Because I know if I had something wrong, in
Right.
quotes,
Yes.
with me, that there would be, I could get funding, or I can get this, I can get that. But a part of me just wanted to go out and do it and prove to myself that I could do it with this condition. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like overcome the adversity of what, happened to me, and that I'd feel like a better bigger person, which is very selfish in some way, right?
but you had a point to prove, and you wanted to prove that nothing was going to stop you, maybe?
yeah, like I didn't want something to show that I was going to be burdened by something that I'd be labeled differently. So
Right.
but things are better, but a little bit of recall is still an issue. But I think it's now become part of who I am. So I think I've created some strategies. I don't know what they are now, because it's so natural once you've overcome.
Right.
It's been a few years now since that
Right.
time. So I can't recall strategies that I'm using, but I've definitely worked around it for sure.
Right. So it's just become part of who you are now. And that's wonderful. That's what we all want to move towards after a life-changing event like you experienced. So are people surprised when you tell them your story and about the challenges you've had?
Yeah, definitely. What first surprises them the most is my age. And I think that's one of the big realities in today's society, is that we think that all these major clinical problems that happen are only attributed to older generations
For sure.
or elderly, but that is totally not the case. And if you go into a hospital and go to the pediatric side or young adult side, young adults still have the chance to have strokes and
For
have
sure.
heart diseases and all these other things that you would think elderly people would get because of or what we thought was because they're elderly, they're degenerating. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
and you're more subject to things like heart disease, high blood pressure, all those things. You don't associate that with youth, but that is on the rise.
Yeah.
Young people experiencing stroke. So, do you ever find yourself in a position that you're educating people that stroke can strike at any age?
Yeah, I think definitely. When I tell people about this, they are surprised, but I have to let them know that, you know what, what you think a stroke is totally not the case. So you have to educate them on what a stroke is,
Right.
because for me, mine was just caused due to a blockage from an infection.
Right.
Right? So people don't understand, like a blockage can be anything. Like that,
Exactly.
there's tons of things that can cause a blockage, and it doesn't matter what age you're at, So I think that's the first bit of truth you have to let people know about,
Right.
is that can happen to anyone, right?
And hats off to you for promoting that and educating people. Because I know myself, I heard a lot of, well, you were so healthy. Well, stroke can strike anyone. It's not just your lifestyle and your current health that can cause it. So, yeah, hats off for you to do it. So, I guess further to that, you pursue many outdoor adventures. So, were you always drawn to that? Or did your medical challenges have an influence?
For me, I always was an outdoor enthusiast and always wanted to do outdoor sports. But having heart surgery pushed me even further to prove to me more physically and mentally, that I could overcome a lot of these hard challenges physically. So it was when I was younger, and I still am younger, but when I was younger,
Right.
It was definitely like I gotta get tough. I gotta prove that I can still be a buff dude and overcome these things with being outdoors and stuff, climb these tallest peaks or whatever.
Right.
And then later on, it also became more of a mental game too. Okay, now I gotta prove that I can mentally do this, and I'd go beyond these things of the effects of stroke and heart surgeries. So.
Wow, that's so inspiring. And to show that you went through something so significant and life altering, and how you're overcome that and even going beyond what anybody's expectations were. I mean, I know for myself, and I'm still somewhat early in my recovery, I feel like I've been given a second chance, and I know I want to live life to the fullest. So
Definitely carpe diem, seize the day.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, thank you for that. So would you mind sharing some of your adventures?
Definitely. Oh, geez. Well, one that I just did last week, or no, 2 weeks ago now, because we're already in. It's Sunday.
Yeah,
that
May
that we're
27th.
recording this one. Yeah.
You bet.
So 2 weeks ago now, I was out in the Bahamas for a week. So I am actually an avid scuba diver. I'm actually finishing my dive master training.
Great.
And so we were in the Bahamas and scuba diving every day, and I was hanging out with stingrays, sharks, all types of fish, lobsters and crabs and stuff. So just checking out all the coral reefs out in the Bahamas. And before that, I've done West Coast Trail out in Vancouver Island, Juan de Fuca. I've climbed some of the tallest peaks in Waterton National Park and Fisher Peak out in Cranbrook area there.
How
in
exciting.
BC. So tons of things, and I love to travel more and do more outdoorsy stuff. But I love just being outside, and doesn't matter what that is or what I'm doing. So
Well, that's fantastic. And I know with you saying you're becoming a dive master, maybe that's one thing I'll work towards being able to scuba dive in the future. So thank you again. Inspiring. I want to sort of backtrack. So when I did episode 1, I talked about my story and how we decided to start doing this podcast. And I mentioned Dan, who was the catalyst for us doing it with his podcast. So now we have this Dan here with us today. Can you tell us about the podcast you produce?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been part of a Catholic media company for a little while now, and we have a podcast called The Coaster, and you can find it on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, Google Play Music, and many other casting apps where you can get a podcast. The premise of The Coaster is it's just a podcast that happens to be Catholic. And I think the beauty about it is it's just a bunch of young folks that just want to have conversations, no matter what the conversation is about. We just get to have a conversation, and there may be some faith involved, but it's not very down your throat, nor is it very theological. It's just a honest to truth conversation, and
sounds refreshing. I know I've listened to quite a few of them, and I've enjoyed them, and I enjoy the casual conversation you have, and it just feels like you've invited someone into your kitchen and you're having a chat. So it's great. So you do bring faith into it, and in a previous episode we talked about faith and healing. Did faith play a part in your healing?
Totally. That was probably one of the biggest things that kind of, I think, kept me alive and mentally alive as well. Of course, family and support is a huge part of that, but faith plays a huge role in healing, and not just from an internal side, but externally too. If we pray for folks who are in need of prayer, need divine healing prayer, they will receive it. And I was a testament to that. I know that I was receiving prayers from many people that had a role in providing me the opportunity that the Holy Spirit would guide and intercede in my healing. And I think that's a huge part of it. And on a personal side, definitely had a more in deep connection with my faith and where I stood in life. Because it's not until you get to a moment where you're about to die that you really question your faith. And that's really, sometimes you want to step away and totally give up because you're at the end.
Right.
And you don't know what the answer will be. Is it true? Is it not true?
Right.
Why have you forsaken me?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of, but I definitely know that when I started to just accept it and pray myself, and when I was receiving my last rites and stuff before my surgeries and stuff, you really come to a sense that there is something bigger and better out there and no matter what happens, I accept it and go from there. So
Beautiful words
yeah.
that just offer so much hope and joy in your heart that you can come to that peace when you're in such an adverse situation. So we've talked about many things, but I guess any tips or suggestions for stroke survivors to help people to keep moving forward?
Yeah, definitely. So depending on the type of stroke you have and where you are at, physically and mentally, I think no matter what you are or where you're at, set goals and make them happen. I think for me, the worst thing someone could do is they have a goal and they don't try. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Or like it's okay to fail. I think that was the thing. Like I noticed a lot of times where if I want to, let's say, go hiking again, and I
Right.
failed maybe 100 or 1,000 times before I actually got to that point.
Wow.
But I just kept trying, and I think that's probably the biggest thing I can tell someone who's suffered or gone through. I wouldn't say suffer. Gone through a stroke
Yeah.
and the things that come around with it.
Right.
That there is moments where you want to give up and you want to fail and you're just
Right.
like, I can't get over these effects. This sucks. Like I know what it was before and whatever. But if you overcome those barriers, anything is possible. Anything. So
Wow. Beautiful words again.
Yeah.
And yes, keep trying, keep trying. I just love it. So thank you so much for sharing your story and your journey with us today. I know I'm constantly amazed at the resiliency of people around us, and you've shown how resilient you've been and overcome your adversity, and you're proudly wearing your tragedy as armor, referring to our quote. You inspire hope, strength, peace. Thank you, Dan.
thanks for having me.
Now it's time for Speak to the Tweet.
Here's a tweet for you. I like the SMART goals you talk about in episode 3. Thank you. It's a great acronym for setting good goals. For more information, listen to episode 3. Get up and goal.
This week's Joke of the Week.
I used to believe that the brain was the most important organ. But then I thought, hey, who's telling me that? Oh my, who's telling me to laugh now?
This week's Stroke Link. Hey Chris, how's it going today?
Great, how about you?
I'm doing good too. Hey, it's important to remember that stroke can strike anyone.
That's for sure, just like our guest today, Dan, demonstrated. I'm sure he never expected to have a stroke as a teenager. There are a lot of articles on the web related to younger people having strokes. The focus still seems to be towards stroke being related to lifestyle, though.
Yeah, it's the cause of the majority of strokes at any age, up to 86% I've read.
That is true. I did read one article that talked specifically about young people having strokes, and although the main theme was lifestyle, it did go into other causes of stroke that a person may have no control over, such as abnormal blood vessels.
Yes, I read it too, at your insistence, in fact. The focus was on things younger people could do to prevent stroke, which is so important, while giving some information on things people cannot change. In all cases, it stressed the importance of recognizing the signs that you may be having a stroke.
That's for sure. That's where the most good can be done for the most people. Remember, a stroke can strike at any age, any time. So learn to recognize the signs and don't delay getting medical help. no matter the cause.
Exactly. You know, in a later episode, we will explore things we can do to help prevent stroke. But for now, we'd like to recommend an article to you. It's called, "Do You Think You're Too Young to Have a Stroke?" Now, the link for this article is really long, so we're going to put it up on our Facebook page.
Check it out. Last but not least, remember FAST, F-A-S-T. If you or a loved one experience any changes in your face, arm, or speech, time to get yourself to the hospital quickly. You can call 911 in Canada for emergencies, or for inquiries you can call HealthLink in Canada at 1-866-408-5465 and talk to a healthcare professional.
Hey, so that's our show for this week. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and leave us a comment on Podbean. If you have any questions or comments, jokes or ideas for future topics, don't hesitate to get a hold of us. Please also visit our webpage at www.7jarsofhotpickedpeppers.com.
So until next time, remember, everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, then it isn't the end. Goodbye and good health.